Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Stephanie Baker, Communications Director for Team Celeste, and I'm going to let our two guests tonight go ahead and introduce themselves. Celeste, would you like to start?
Sure. So I am Celeste Williams, a family nurse practitioner and the Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress here in Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District. And the reason I'm running for Congress is I want to make sure that nobody gets sick, or nobody gets sick. Nobody goes broke just because they get sick, that we have a world-class education system here in Arkansas, and that all workers in America are paid a fair wage. So aside from being a family nurse practitioner, I am also a former foster mom, adoptive mom to 4. And so this is a conversation tonight very near and dear to my heart.
Thank you, Celeste. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm Kelly Krout, and I'm running for state representative in District 90, which is the Rogers, Lowell, North Springdale area. I'm also a Democratic candidate, and my platform is very similar. I'm very concerned about public education, healthcare, a living wage. I have also been a foster mom, also an adoptive mom. I have 7 children, 6 who are in school. So this is a big conversation for me as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, I would like to go ahead and remind our viewers that if you have questions for Celeste, you're welcome to put them in the comments, and I am monitoring them right here, and we'll ask them as we have time. I want us to go ahead and jump right into this very difficult and sometimes emotionally charged conversation that I know these two wonderful women will handle with grace. Celeste, when we are thinking about how COVID affects children, I know this new information is coming out constantly, and we still don't know everything, but one of the top things on everyone's mind is school this fall. As a nurse practitioner and a mother of 4, what is your opinion about going back to school in person in 3 weeks?
So I can't give a really short answer to that, but I will say there's no easy solution. There's just not. And, before I took a lot of comfort in the fact that there was some data that had indicated that kids were less likely to get COVID and less likely to pass it on. And in the last week, as science gets more data, then we have sometimes different conclusions. And, there were some studies that come out that say, no, actually, that is not correct. And that kids are just as likely to get it and just as likely to pass it on, if not more. And so we're back to, the knowledge that kids are a great vector of disease. And, if you look at the CDC guidelines, and they're not a regulatory agency, they make recommendations, and they do talk about what to do with mild or moderate community spread. And they also talk about what to do with more severe levels of COVID in the community. And when it's at higher levels, it is not recommended for them to go back to school. And, this is a new virus. There are a lot of things that we don't know. But for myself, I had been fairly comfortable in sending them back to school. And today I, filled out that form to request for them to go to virtual school. And that is just a really hard decision to make. And, it is really hard on children to not get to see their friends and not get to go to school. And, I know that there's a cost to them not being there. We all know that the best thing for kids, for their emotional well-being, for their growth and development and their academic achievement, the best thing is for them to be in school. But right now, that's not the best thing for our community. And I knew I was going to cry. I'm not going to apologize. I am a human being, and this is hard. But you know, it does feel a little bit like I am choosing to put the safety of my children's teachers above my children's emotional well-being. And I am not a teacher. And, you know, we're going to muddle through this the best that we can. And I am certainly going to be a very loud advocate for our elected officials to really get real about tackling this virus and reducing the spread. And, you know, I've said a gazillion times, and we all know how we do that is test, trace, isolate, and, you know, and then we also need to think about, once we have a vaccine, which is probably not going to be for a while, we need to be educating people right now about the safety of vaccines, and that, you know, there may be a third of our population that's not comfortable getting this vaccine, and that does not help us get to herd immunity, and that could extend this even longer. And we all know that there are tremendous economic and emotional consequences to living this way.
For sure. Thank you, Celeste. So my second part of the question was, what needs to happen to get us to a place where our kids can go to school safely? And you addressed that. We need to get our numbers in check. We need more testing, more contact tracing, more isolating of positive cases. Kelly, as a parent of, did you say 7?
Yes,
7
ma'am.
children.
I just want to acknowledge something really quick.
My
Kelly,
notes.
you're the no, I was gonna say, Kelly, you are the first candidate with more kids than me.
Congratulations.
Oh,
you
that is
win.
I win this one. Yep. So I've got 7. One is an adult. He's out of the house. And then I've got a pre-Ker. But so I've got 5 that are, you know, 1st through 9th grade.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of kids.
With 7 children, 6 of whom you're making school decisions. Have you made a decision what your kids are going to do this fall?
I did. And at first I made the decision to for sure keep my little ones home and let my junior high and high school kids go, because I thought their social stuff was more important, that they were more capable of wearing masks all day long. And then there was the whole, are we going to wear masks? Are we not going to wear masks? And then they mandated masks, but then I just did not feel right about it. And I've gone ahead and pulled them, and they were okay with it, because the thing is, the parts of school that they really, really love, those parts of school aren't going to be there this fall. You're not sitting with your friends at lunch. You're not hanging out in between classes at lockers. That kind of stuff, it's not going to be the same. Some of my younger ones deal with some pretty intense anxiety, and I'm very confident that they wouldn't learn very well in that environment. Just that's personal to that specific child, but that's a decision that we made quite a while ago. So I've actually feel pretty at peace with it now, because we've been sitting with this for a while. But my school district, I do not think has that many that have chosen virtual.
Okay. So Kelly, you are a candidate for state representative in Arkansas's 90th district. As a candidate, when you're elected, you'll be a member of our state legislation, and you'll be in close proximity to our governor. Do you have any thoughts about the town hall and Dr. Romero's announcement about mandating 5-day in-person options in school districts?
You know, I'm torn on this, because like when it was the mask thing, I wanted the whole state to do this together and let's do a statewide mask mandate. And at the time, everybody was like, no, let each individual area decide. I feel like for school, that actually makes more sense. And, you know, we may have some rural school districts that might not have nearly the caseload that we have up here and could more safely accommodate students. I think it makes sense to be able to let Fayetteville, where there's really high numbers right now. You know, I was talking with a teacher friend today who was just talking about they had their first meeting yesterday, talking about the logistics of how they're doing this. And he was saying, we spent like an hour talking about lunch. How are we going to have kids eat lunch? Because they're going to eat in the classroom, but there's 25 of them. And if they have their masks off, they have to be 6 feet apart. We can't put 25 kids in a room 6 feet. I mean, just the logistics that they're having to wrestle through right now are mind numbing. So I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but I do feel like the school districts ought to be able to make that call. But all of this is hard. I don't envy anybody having to make that ultimate decision. Parents, teachers, the leaders, it's all tough.
Sure. I want to remind our viewers that if you do have a question for either Kelly or Celeste, you can put it in the comments and we will get to it as soon as we can. Celeste, I want to go back. You mentioned this a little bit about how we have new information because of new studies and we're learning more as we go. So these newer studies, the most recent studies, are showing that transmission rates are actually high among children. And, you know, just a few weeks ago, we were having this discussion where they thought kids under 10 weren't great vectors because of that protein. So can you just speak to our viewers a little bit about the scientific method and like why this is valid science? And because I think some people get confused when recommendations change and the science is supposedly changing. Can you just speak from a scientific perspective as a nurse a little bit about that process?
So I'm gonna take some liberties here and kind of use it more of like sort of the process that nurses go through, which is modeled off of the scientific method. But basically, you take subjective and objective data, and you're going to continually analyze that, and then you're going to come up with a hypothesis. And so then you're going to test and experiment and figure out the answer to this question, and then you're going to publish that data. And then somebody else is going to look at it, and they're going to ask a different question about it and test and retest. And so, you know, when you get more and more information out and people asking different questions and questions from a different angle, you're going to get more information. And as we've said all along, this is a new virus. Like what we know today may be very different than what we know 100 days from now. I mean, the healthcare community used to recommend smoking to reduce the size of the birth or reduce the birth weight for women. We all know that that is a ludicrous suggestion at this point. But, you know, human beings, we like to think that we are so smart and we just intuitively know what right from wrong. We're idiots sometimes. And, you know, it takes a lot of data collection to realize, you know, that's a really bad idea and that's harming people, you know. So it is just with the better information that we have now, we have a better understanding of what's happening. And, you know, it's not that science has failed when we get a deeper, better understanding. It's that science is working and that we realize that our previous hypothesis was wrong. And that is an amazing testament to the scientific method. You know, we postulate a question and then investigate, and we either prove it right or we prove that it is dead wrong. And, you know, that's a wonderful process, and it's just hard for those of us who are not used to living through that to process sometimes.
So this was not a planned question that I had, but you talking about that makes me think of this. We know that there was a public health pandemic crisis unit that was funded. There was a plan that was defunded. So this leads me to think that this is exactly the reason we need investment in this kind of research, so that we can have pandemic preparedness, but also so that we can do this research that we need to do. So from a congressional perspective, if you were in Congress, tell us what that process would look like for you. Where would you be putting that funding?
So I think we have to invest that in local and state public health structures that are already in place. You know, we've been defunding the health department for decades. And so really it is, you know, it's one of those situations where, you know, we don't appreciate public health because we aren't seeing all the problems that they're preventing. We aren't living with polio. We aren't living with measles outbreaks all the time. When we turn on the water, we generally feel pretty confident that we can drink that water out of the tap and not get some terrible gastrointestinal infection, or that it's got lead in it. You know, these are all testaments to our public health system that really keep us safe and healthy every day. And when you aren't seeing those problems, then it is very easy for people who don't understand public health to say, well, why are we spending so much money on this? When they don't understand what we're saving and how we are improving our lives and our societies by investing in that. And so I think we have to have a very strong public health system in place so that we can quickly respond when the next pandemic comes, when the next healthcare crisis comes, that we can ramp up all of the needed tools and people to make sure that we can really address this problem. And when I look at this, I think so many things are interconnected, and our environment with climate change is really being stressed right now. And we know that people living in close proximity to other humans or with animals like bats, where we think that this may have started, that when the environment is stressed, you're more likely to have these things come on. And so things like Zika and other things that we haven't even thought about, that may be our next big problem, and we need to be prepared for it.
Thank you, Celeste. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Kelly, in addition to being a mother of 7 children and running for office, you are currently working on your master's in social work. So I'd like to ask you to speak to the concerns that I'm hearing a lot of folks have in general about children experiencing anxiety when maybe they didn't previously, but this pandemic has them feeling scared or anxious, and uncertainty about school, stress, things like that. Is that something that you're noticing and that you're hearing from the social work realm?
Sure. Yeah. And my experience is kind of unique in that I had kind of anxious kids to start out with, and school honestly was kind of stressful for a couple of them. And so weirdly, their anxiety has been a little bit lower to be home, which is strange. But they are missing their friends, and I'm noticing attachment, to stuffed animals that so-and-so gave me because it reminds me of them, and just just little unique stressors that I wasn't noticing before. And I'm like, oh, this is impacting them more than I realized, because I kind of thought I was keeping them in a little bubble here. But I mean, there's obviously big concerns about our more vulnerable kids and who's got eyes on them. And some of these kids have not been seen since March. I'm very concerned about if we get to an in-person school here on the week of the 24th, the hotline calls are going to be out of this world, because these kids have not been seen for so long, and there's going to be all kinds of reports, and we don't have bukus of foster families sitting around empty. Like, they're full. They're always full. And so I'm very concerned about that. And I wanted to add a little to my answer previously. Part of the reason that I've pulled my kids is that I recognize that I've got the privilege to be able to do that. And let's be real, if the Krouts aren't at school, everybody else can social distance a little bit easier, because that's fewer people. So I'm trying to use the privilege for good to help make some extra space at school for the kids that really need to be in person and have that kind of support. But it's tough. I'm also hearing a whole lot of, well, and Celeste, you mentioned this too, like, kids need this, they need the emotional connection, they need the social connection, but we don't have any evidence on how kids do at school during a pandemic, when everybody's wearing masks, when their teacher's wearing a face shield, when your kindergarten teacher can't give you last year, my kindergartner's teacher had to peel him off of my leg on the first day. How's that work in a pandemic? I mean, we can't say how that affects our kids' mental health. We don't know that yet. And so there's just so many unknowns. It's a tough time, and nobody's got the answers, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about like needing to physically assist a child yet.
Yeah.
And you're right. When I would drop her off at preschool, I would always have to like pull out of the carpool line to not hold it up so that I could like peel her out of the car. Yes,
Ugh.
that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that yet. Celeste, I know that in your career as a nurse practitioner, you also deal with mental health. Mental health is healthcare. Have you noticed among your adult population an increase in anxiety and stress due to the
Absolutely.
pandemic?
Yes. Yes. So a lot of times somebody sort of has a long standing dealing with anxiety issue, but they feel like they can function, and they generally are functioning in all of the different roles of their lives. But now that they have this added giant stressor, then they're struggling a lot more. And, I always tell my patients, when you feel like your anxiety or your depression is affecting your ability to parent the way that you want, to be the spouse that you want to be, or to perform at the level you expect of yourself in your job, it is time to get help. And so, yes, I have certainly written a whole lot more prescriptions for anti-anxiety, antidepressants, and done a lot of referrals for counseling. And certainly, I think the beginning of that conversation also needs to have the statement that what you're feeling is normal right now, because what we're living through isn't normal. And I think it's really important that we all give ourselves and those around us a whole lot more grace right now. And it's just hard. Human beings are by design relational and crave interconnectedness, and right now we feel isolated.
Yes, thank you, Celeste. This also brings me to another point about, Kelly, you mentioned kids going back into school and hotlines being busy because kids have been out for so long, and there are so many things that we're going to have to catch up. If, let's say, we can't go back to school in person, we're not ready in 3 weeks and something changes. How do we continue feeding kids who are hungry and rely on that school setting for breakfast and lunch? And I know there have been programs happening during the summer, largely because communities are pitching in and helping. But how can we, if you were elected to the state legislation, how do we ensure that those kids have their needs met when they're not in a school setting?
Yeah, that's another tough. I mean, I guess the community, like you said, would continue to step up as they have and have been so amazing. Part of the biggest reason that I wanted to run in the first place before all of this was just funding for our public schools. I've got so many teacher friends that are begging for school supplies online, or I see them at Black Friday sales and they're, stocking up on stuff at their classroom, and they don't have what they need to do their jobs well without spending their own money. So we just need better funding, and that's going to funnel into the food service as well, because we have a lot of kids on free and reduced that are going to need that, whether or not they're in a classroom. And I do think they've got some pretty cool setups with, drive-throughs and pickup spots and things like that. But it's going to get complicated if you've got in-person school happening and then trying to do that for kids that maybe stay home. But I would just continue to advocate that we've got to look out for those who are having a hard time taking care of themselves right now, and just fund these schools better.
I would like to chime in and say we have got to fully fund the IDEA. Like, public schools are required to provide public education for all children. They don't get to pick and choose which kids are coming to their schools. They educate every single child. And a lot of children have some special needs that if they get the therapies that they need, that they can actually do just as well as all of the other children that didn't start out with those special needs. And I think that is so important to, I think that when we look at where we are right now, it is obvious that what was normal before this kind of led to where we are right now. And normal wasn't working for everybody. And, Kelly's right, talking about how teachers have been, stocking their classrooms. And, we as parents, we always buy extra supplies to bring for the rest of the class. And that is ludicrous. Like, what are we doing? Why are we making our teachers do this right now? And I think about, like, what are our teachers supposed to do now? Like, are they supposed to use their money from their salary to put plexiglass dividers between the kids and buy all the hand sanitizer themselves so that they can, and cleaning supplies so that we can decontaminate the area where kids that are picking their noses and sneezing on each other, because that's what children do. Like, you're gonna get all this extra stuff to wipe down the area. Like, that's not gonna work. It isn't
and
working.
Where are they
now.
gonna buy it? It's
Yes,
out of stock
where are they gonna
everywhere.
buy it? Yes. And that's another thing. Holy cow, can our government actually help procure needed supplies? Like, this is insanity. We are at a point where our leaders have absolutely left us on our own to figure it out. We need some guidance from state level and federal level. And it's not happening. And I think that, I'm sad about I'm having to make for my family, but I am absolutely furious that we have been failed. This didn't have to be like this. It didn't. This is the United States of America, and we're not acting like it. We are acting like a third world country. We're not a developing nation. We're supposed to be the most strong nation in the entire world. And we're not behaving that way. And our children deserve better. Our communities deserve better. And every single person in Arkansas deserves better. And I guarantee you that Kelly will bring you better. And I sure as hell am going to do better than Steve Womack.
Thank you, Celeste. I 100% co-sign and believe that for sure. And if you're just now tuning in, viewers, this is a very, very personal subject to these mothers and candidates who are working and raising families and running for office to try to make the world a better place. And Celeste and Kelly, you both kind of fed into my very next question when you were talking about fully funding IDEA. My next question was about if we have to do all virtual because our government has failed us and this COVID-19 crisis is not in check, how do we ensure that these kids get those school-based therapies that they're used to getting? And what would be a solution for that? Whoever wants to take that one.
I'll jump in. I actually had a conversation with my kid's principal today. And, those therapies, a lot of them are their contracts within the school. So like kids who are getting school-based counseling, that's still going to happen. Some of it may be virtual. They may, but they're going to get those therapies in the school. And then if they're going to do all that they can to make it work virtually as well. And that includes physical therapy and occupational therapy. And, you think about that, those are very physical things. I think that's going to put parents in a situation where, they're going to have to help as well. They're going to have to basically be a physical therapy aid for their child or whoever is there in the home with that child, because they need help. They can't do everything they'll do the best that they can to make it work virtually. And, like in the school, normally you could have a group of children that all need physical or occupational therapy together. But if you do it virtually, you can't do it all together because of privacy violations. You can't, the parents can't see the other kids who are needing the therapy. And so that also creates some difficulties for the schools to work out. And, I know that the educators who are doing the work are amazing human beings who are doing everything that they can to make this work. And teachers are creative, innovative, and but they need we just need to make sure that they're getting some guidelines so that they'll make it work. Whatever we're asking of them, they're going to do the best that they can. So I'll just leave it there.
Kelly, did you want to chime in on that one?
As far as specific therapies and stuff, honestly, I mean, I hope some of these things happen. Some of them are probably just going to be put on hold, but I think we all just need to kind of get on board with being okay that everybody falls a little bit behind. We're all falling behind together. It's not like there's this one random school district in America that's been able to carry on this whole time. All of the kids are going to be a little further behind than they were last year at the beginning, but kids are resilient and they're going to bounce back, and teachers are amazing and they're going to meet kids where they are the way that they have always done. So I have full confidence that our kids are not just going to lose a year of schooling and that's going to show up in the rest of their lives. Like, they're going to catch up, and I feel like they're going to be okay, but it's going to look kind of rocky here for a bit. But this whole thing has just shown us how much we were depending on schools to kind of fix every problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, so many things have been, well, what about this? What about this? The school's supposed to do this. And like, okay, so if schools are so important, why are they not funded? Why are we just assuming that they will do everything? Like, if we say that schools are that important, we need to value them and value those teachers. And they're not feeling that right now, I don't think.
No, they're not.
Absolutely. I'm going to address some viewer questions now. I had a question come in from a viewer wanting to choose virtual for her 10th grader, but realizing that the virtual curriculum doesn't offer the AP classes that child needs. Is this something you've heard happening often, and how can that be fixed? Kelly, do you want to take that one as state level?
Well, I don't know about a state level. It's just not an option right now with the online, and that just stinks. My son was also going to he was going to do pre-AP classes as a freshman, and now he's just not going to. But it's just, it stinks, and that is one of those things that's going to carry forward a little bit, because you don't get to redo the 12th grade and do, or 10th grade. But that's just one of the cons of virtual, unfortunately. And I don't have a great solution for that unless we fund it better and get more teachers that are able to teach AP virtually. But right now, I just think it's not on the table.
Thank you. We had another question come in. See if I'm scrolling through to find it. Sorry. Okay, so this one is again about choosing virtual. Somebody who agrees that virtual is the best option for safety of children and safety of teachers and staff. But for parents that have to go into work, they're wondering, how is that addressed? Can you guys discuss that?
So I certainly think that's a real problem. I mean, we live in a society where it takes 2 working parents to pay all the bills, and that's leaving out the single parents who are having to work twice as hard to make ends meet. And we don't have a safety net in place to help with that. And unfortunately, like, women are bearing the brunt of the economic impacts of this right now. It was a few months ago when they said that about 13% of job loss right now is because women have dropped out of the workforce to provide childcare. And women, if you don't have children, you're probably going to stay on par with your male counterparts for your income. That income gap, the biggest thing that comes from is motherhood. When you drop out of the workforce, even for a year or two to take care of your children, that work gap creates you're never gonna recoup those losses. That changes the trajectory of your income for decades, and that is an enormous impact. And there's no simple answer to how to solve that. And women, unfortunately, we're bearing the brunt of that right now. And unless we decide that we're going to pay people to stay at home with their kids, they're going to have to send their kids to school. They don't have another option. And, one of the other things that we've done as a society is, and even myself, like if I need help with childcare, I ask my parents to help. Well, if I'm sending my kids to school, I can't send them to my parents' house and risk them getting sick from my kids maybe having COVID. It's just, this pandemic has really shown all of the weaknesses in our society. And I find it really ironic that the people who we've deemed essential right now are often the people that we financially value the least.
Absolutely. And that was the next point I was going to come to is, and we've said this many times, you've said this many times, Celeste, that these underlying issues have always been here. They're just exacerbated by this pandemic.
Yeah.
So I've heard you say this before, and I really liked the way you said it. And we don't want to get back to normal. As you said earlier tonight, normal is what got us where we are. What do we need to do differently? How can we as a society use our budget as a moral document and take care of each other? What should our goal be? If you were reimagining how we come out of this stronger, what do you see?
So if I think about education, I think we have to recenter what are we asking our schools to do? And in every single problem, there lies an opportunity for better, that we can come out of this and do things different. And so I think it's a chance to look and see what's not working for us as a society. Are we really, are we preparing kids for the skills that they need to have as they grow up? Are we preparing them for the job market? Are we preparing them for technical school? Are we preparing them for college? And, I think a lot of times our schools have been guilty of trying to say that everybody's going to college. Well, that's not reality. And there are some really good paying jobs that are vocational type jobs, and we need those people and we need those jobs. And I think it is also looking at our economy, and this is hitting middle and lower income families much harder than those who have higher incomes that are able to work at home or work from home. And we're losing a lot of our small businesses. And middle-class Americans have always been the economic engine for this country. And we're not putting any gas in the tank right now.
Absolutely.
And we have to create opportunities for investment and improvement from where we are right now.
Kelly, do you want to take that?
That was a long aspirational answer.
It was good. That's what I asked for. I asked you to reimagine. So thank you for that. I'd like to give Kelly an opportunity to respond to that as well. Kelly, you're well aware of the issues that have been here that are underlying. How do you envision us coming out of this stronger? What should we value? What changes should we make?
Well, like Celeste, I would just echo, we've got to be valuing these essential workers that have kept the wheels on the bus of this whole time. They're not getting valued. Our teachers are not getting valued. We need to reimagine schools. They are not responsible for every single fault in our society. They are responsible for educating our children. And we need to start narrowing that in and delegating some of these other problems out. And so I think that hopefully that'll be part of where this goes. If we're able to get elected and reimagine some of these things to take some of the pressure off of one entity. It just makes sense to me.
Yes. Well, when you guys are elected, you can address that. Or like you said, we can properly fund these schools and give them the expertise and the employees that they need if we're going to do these things in a school-based setting.
I want to just add one other thing here.
Sure, go for it.
maybe we shouldn't be bailing out the cruise line industry, and instead should be investing in everyday people who will then stimulate the economy. And maybe we won't be in some giant, horrible hole with our economy.
Amen. We have another question that's we addressed this a little bit. I'm not sure if this person was watching in the beginning, but they were talking about Fayetteville having this plan in place. And now the governor has come and said, oh, wait a second, there's actually a mandate for 5-day in-person school. Kelly, do you want to just reiterate your answer to that one? Your plan for how you think that should have been addressed?
Yeah, just the short version of that is I really feel like each school district probably should be able to make their own decision based on their own situation. I'm frustrated for the families of Fayetteville because this was announced weeks ago and they've been planning around it. And now this is a sudden shift that's causing unnecessary chaos that it could have been noticed right away. Like, oh, wait, 2 days. No, that won't work with our statewide mandate. I don't know why it wasn't caught sooner. And that frustrates me for those families if you've made plans around that. But we're just going with the flow as we continue to do. And I just know I empathize big time with these families.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions come through, and we have gone over our half-hour time, which I figured we would with such an amazing topic to talk about here. So many different ways to go with this discussion. I want to give you each time to give closing thoughts to our viewers tonight. Kelly, I'm going to start with you. Do you have any closing thoughts for everyone?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, just thank you for inviting me tonight. I appreciate you valuing my thoughts on the topic. I recognize that these are impossible decisions that we shouldn't have to be making, and it's not easy. And just because I've chosen one thing, it doesn't make it the right thing for you. Everybody's just trying to do the best that they can and hopefully look out for each other. And we've got to do what we can do to help each other out. And I'll continue advocating for just the health and safety of our community because that's my priority.
Thank you. And for those of you watching, Kelly is running for state representative in District 90. You can go to her website at her Facebook page, Kelly for Arkansas. Celeste, would you close us out, please?
Sure. I usually like to end with a little call to action. And so my call to action today is if you know somebody who is not registered to vote, or if you're not sure if those around you are registered to vote, then I would say, let's all try to get 5 people to register to vote, because politics matters. And I know a lot of people like to say that they don't like to pay attention, their vote doesn't matter. Well, yes, it does. And politics, whether you pay attention to it or not, it touches your life. It affects you and what opportunities you have in the world and what you can achieve. And whether it's healthcare or education or just driving on a road that you don't hit a pothole and blow out your tire. These are things that are affected by those who are elected and in office that are supposed to be representing you. And so I would urge everybody to register to vote, and then make sure you do go vote on November 3rd. And I would like you to vote for me.
Thank you so much. And you guys can also visit Celeste. You're here on her Facebook page, but the website is celestewilliamsforarkansas.com. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We will do this again on August 20th. That's 2 Thursdays from now. We'll be mainly talking about renters' rights and evictions, and Senator Greg Leding will join us that evening. So we hope you'll tune in for that. Thank you, everyone.